In this video, we'll look at how to create pivot joints in Corona SDK. Joints can be used to assemble complex physical objects from multiple rigid bodies. For example, joints can be used to join the limbs of a ragdoll figure, attach the wheels of a vehicle to its body, create a moving elevator platform, and so on. Most joints are used to connect two rigid physical bodies, so you must create these bodies first and then submit them as arguments to the physics.newJoint constructor function, along with other properties that vary depending on the joint type being created. Let's look at the code for creating a pivot joint. A pivot joint, known as a revolute joint in Box2D terms, joins two bodies at an overlapping point like two boards joined by a rotating peg. The initial arguments are bodies A and B to join, followed by the X and Y coordinates for the anchor point declared in content space coordinates. Pivot joints can be rotated clockwise or counterclockwise using a joint motor. You can also set the speed and torque of the motor. Here's an example of a pivot joint using a joint motor. Let's look at the code. We've added the required physics library and started the physics engine. We've also set the physics draw mode to hybrid so you can see through the objects to observe the pivot joint. Next, we create two rigid bodies to be joined together. One body is dynamic so it can move, and the other is static so it stays in place. We then join the rigid bodies together using physics.newJoint, where we pass in the parameters to create the pivot joint. As mentioned before, the parameters consist of the type of joint, the rigid bodies, and the X and Y coordinate where the pivot joint will be created. To spice things up a bit, we've enabled a joint motor and set its motor speed and torque. Rotation limits can be set on a pivot joint to ensure that the range of angular motion stays consistent for a given situation. There are also a number of other methods and properties that can be used to influence the behavior of pivot joints. Check the documentation located on the Corona Labs website for more details. If a joint is no longer needed, you can destroy it by calling either object::remove self or display.remove. If one of the joint bodies is destroyed, however, the associated joint will be automatically destroyed as well. So it's important to remember to properly remove and nil any references to a joint which has been destroyed. And that's a look at how to create pivot joints in Corona SDK. Learn more about working with Corona SDK at coronalabs.com/university.